Hi, I'm Dilip DS. I'm the head of Infinia's Southeast Asian operations. I manage loyalty, customer engagement, and all other digital solutions for Infinia for the region. Well, what we've seen over the last year and a half especially, and after talking to a few people right this morning, there's clearly a sense of this year being a very challenging year for banks, and as will the next couple of years be. The macroeconomic environment hasn't been very pretty over the last few years. And on top of that, increasing regulations have meant that not only keeping your existing businesses becoming harder, but getting new businesses becoming a challenge as well. So what we are seeing is the banks are now looking to, one, hold on to their customers dearly, and two, try and see how they can make the best of what they have. I think while there is a huge focus on bringing your extra customer every day through the door, a lot of people forget what happens to the existing customers because it's a two-way street, unfortunately. So what they're looking to do is see how we can look at changing customers' perceptions to, not be a one-trick pony as far as the bank is concerned and say, I want to offer you more than just the one product or the one credit card that you have. The idea is to enlarge the bank's relationship with the customer and give the customer compelling reasons why he should bank with them instead of the next competitor down the street. So I think there's an increasing shift, especially on the loyalty side, which I will probably restrict myself to at this point because it's more relevant to our kind of business. So what we're seeing is no longer are the days of a credit card loyalty program, there anymore, because banks are looking at a relationship-based program where a customer gets rewarded for not just having a credit card, but gets rewarded for, probably having a salary account with the bank or having a lending product with the bank. The whole emphasis now has shifted to increasing the total relationship value of the customer, and at the same time looking at small things like how do you look at profitable transactions and reward customers for those. Now, there's no point rewarding a customer for all kinds of transactions clearly. It should have some impact to the bank in terms of the bottom line. So things like an alternate channel transaction versus a customer walking into a bank, making an ATM deposit instead of going to the teller. So these are small things that play a large role in terms of the bank's profitability. And I think banks are now looking at this as well. So in terms of loyalty space, we're seeing a definite shift. The last few banks that I've been personally speaking to in the region have all hinted at looking at relationship-based programs rather than just a air miles linked card program, if you will. Yeah, I think when Infinia started, the whole purpose of Infinia starting was to fill a gap or a void in the market. So we're all bankers. The whole team at Infinia is a bunch of people from banks and cards and payment space. So we've all worked in banks. We've seen the limitations of loyalty programs with specific banks because it almost is like every bank wants to catch up with the other. And at the end of it, you take the logo away from the credit card. You don't really know which bank we're talking about. So what we decided was, let's look at each bank in its entirety and say, what does this bank really need? And what do the customers of the bank really need? And we said, let's build a solution which is not a one-size-fits-all, but look at fulfilling certain gaps in each of these banks. So for instance, a particular bank would have a very weak uptake in terms of international transactions. So we start thinking of how can we promote loyalty in such a way that the international spend increases for those particular banks. There are banks where card activation rates used to be a problem. We started running campaigns and consistent communication with these banks to increase their activation rates. Then you have issues of cards not being activated or cards not being used and cards not being retained well enough. So what we did was, along with loyalty, we started building ancillary solutions as well. A classic example is our campaign management and communication engine. So today when you look at loyalty programs, there's a fatigue factor because even as a customer, I look at the paper every day, there are 5 different ads and quite honestly, there's nothing that separates one from the other. So what we said is let's get a little more efficient, let's get a little more effective. Let's look at talking to the customer on his terms instead of putting an ad out there, which is like shooting at the barn hoping that you've hit a target. So we said, let's change this a little bit. Let's talk to the bank and find out what the customers prefer in terms of a communication medium. If they want to talk to you over an email, let's do it over an email. If they want to talk to you over an SMS, let's talk to them over an SMS. Or for that matter, a mobile app. So what we're trying to do now is keep communication more focused, more relevant, and more engaging with the customer. And clearly, when you talk about digital communication versus your conventional old-style communication, you're talking about a 10x difference in terms of cost. So there's cost efficiency that comes in and more relevance to the customer. So all of this put together has resulted in our loyalty program helping banks significantly increase their activation rates, increase their transaction frequency, increase their transaction value. So typically a very startling fact that we can talk about over the last 30 months that Infinia has been successfully running programs around the region. We've seen a customer, let's talk about a customer who's never enrolled into a rewards program and a customer who's actively redeeming in a rewards program. The difference in spend between the two is 3x. So in other words, if 10% of your customers who are not engaged today are engaged and start redeeming, you will see a multifold increase in transactions and transaction value. So I think what banks fail to realize is loyalty programs will only work if you invest in them, the way you're meant to invest. Not invest in a heavy capital expenditure and then let the program run by itself. There's nothing that runs by itself. So what we've done is we don't give a platform there, stick it out there and say, there's your platform, go enjoy it. Doesn't really work that way. It needs to be managed, it needs to be run every single day. In fact, just a few minutes ago, I was talking to one of the bankers where we spoke about, they wanted to have a loyalty program. I said, why? And they said, we want to build loyalty. I said, I'm sorry, you don't build loyalty with a loyalty program. What you really need is to give the customer a really good experience when he walks in through the door the first time. There's only two things that happen when a customer walks in through the door. It's either a warm feeling in his heart or a bitter taste in his mouth. So it depends on what you do on that particular day, which will promote loyalty. My job, once a customer comes in, is to engage him in a relevant manner and reinforce that spirit of loyalty by offering so many options that he feels it's worth being with this bank and not look at any other option. So I think in that sense, we've done everything we can to keep it more and more customized to each bank. Every bank's need is different, every bank's strategy is different, and their policies differ. So I think that's probably how I can explain what we've done so far. That's a great question. In fact, over the last few years, if you look at Southeast Asia, let's look at the population makeup for a moment. So they say 60% of the population is under the age of 30 in most of the Southeast Asian countries, which means the smartphone penetration is already skyrocketing, which means internet transactions and e-commerce transactions are growing every day as we speak. The two fastest growing categories are travel and e-commerce. And travel within e-commerce is a huge component again. So if you look at Infinia's solutions, all our solutions are geared towards an e-commerce model. We're not a bank or we're not a company who's focusing on going to your neighboring shop and buying a voucher. We don't kill too many trees. So what we're looking at is everything is online, everything is seamless, everything is available to the customer whenever he requires it. So in that sense, e-commerce plays a very, very important role. And if you look at banks today, a lot of banks have limited time-bound offers with select e-commerce website, every now and then. But a lot of banks have still not embraced it. And I think what we are doing to help propel that, movement actually is at this point of time, we're working on a product that will give every single bank access to about 10,000 global e-commerce websites where a customer could go and shop, and not only shop, but get rewarded for it. So what we're trying to do in our own little way is to take e-commerce faster to the banks, and it's all transactional. So for a bank, all that they need to look at is, I've now got 10,000 more merchants who my customers can go and transact with, which will increase my transaction spend, my value, and at the same time for the customer, the merchants start rewarding them for transacting with them. So, and I think we're seeing that trend already shift, and I think over the next 3 or 4 years, most loyalty programs will have a compelling e-commerce element in it. It's perfect timing at this venue to talk about this because just a few weeks ago, we moved our global headquarters from the UAE to Singapore. And I think what we mean to do, the whole basis of the move is to demonstrate our focus to this region. And I think Southeast Asia has a huge amount of potential, clearly with the population being what it is and the number of banks that exist in this part of the world. And I think all of them are struggling for differentiation. I think if you look at banks, like I told you earlier, take the logo away and you can't separate one program from the other. So what we're trying to do is create that differentiation which they sorely miss at this point of time. So we've opened offices in Indonesia, which was late last year. We've opened an office in Thailand. Now the global headquarters moving to Singapore is a big move, which is a few weeks ago. And I think over the next 6 months to probably 12, we're looking at opening offices in Vietnam, Philippines, and probably Myanmar, which is again proving to be a hotbed of activity at this point of time. I think we come here with a very clear set of expectations. The expectations at this point of time largely revolve around telling the customers what a compelling solution that we can bring to the table. And secondly, tell them we're here to stay. You know, we're not just one kiosk in a corner who comes every year and goes back without any meaning, but we're here to demonstrate to them, one, we have a great solution, a solution that works, a solution that makes money for you, and at the same time, we're serious about what we do. And we are in the heart of the action. We're not just a million miles away from the action and running everything in a remote manner. So the model of Infinia, as we told you earlier, is all about program management. So, which means I need to be right there, and which explains the reason why we're in Asia at this point. Thank you for having me.